Hey, what's up, guys, and welcome to another episode of Game Script. I'm Simon Edwards, aka Pumacom with Heatseeker Sports, and this game is going to be the Green Bay Packers versus the Detroit Lions, another one of these Thanksgiving Day games, and I'm going to be looking at it from a DraftKings Showdown perspective. We're looking at a total of 46.5 points with Green Bay as 7.5-point dogs. They're playing in Detroit. So it should be an interesting game from that perspective. Detroit beat them in the first game that they played. They beat them pretty handily. Actually, it was a game where Detroit beat them 34-20. And the passing game was basically taken out of the second half for the Detroit side. And Green Bay, I think they scored a lot of garbage time points, or they might have scored some garbage time points there, but I don't think it was as close as that score looks. But we're looking at a game this week where they're going to be playing in Detroit on Thanksgiving, a loud home crowd for Detroit. They finally have a team that is dominant. Their team is looking like they're going to win the division. I don't think there's much competition right now for the division currently, and then they are potentially contending for a number one seed in the conference. So Detroit is playing really well this year. They like to play they got a lot of dynamic players on the team, basically. They got Jahmyr Gibbs, Amon-Ra St Brown, just a ton of options and weapons on the team, and they've been playing well. On the Green Bay side, it's a little bit of a different situation. Jordan Love was the hailed successor to Aaron Rodgers, and he has not done anything this year. He's been kind of a bust if you look at it from this year's performance by Jordan Love. He is just not he's just not a very good quarterback. He started off the season pretty strong, though, but he just kind of fell apart, and we can take a look at some of his game logs here. Before I get into this game, though, hit the like button. I'm looking for 15 likes, and I'll get a shorter video up a little later on with some of my favorite picks in this game, 4 of my favorite picks in this game. And hit subscribe on this YouTube channel. I've put up a game script for every one of these games on the Thanksgiving Day slate. I was joined by Head Chopper to cover the Dallas Cowboys game. I was joined by Spread a Stare to cover the 49ers game, and now I'm doing this one solo. But it's a good game. It's not a huge prize pool as according to like as far as the DraftKings prize pool is concerned. It's not one of their featured contests, quote unquote, but it's still a good slate with 100K to first in this contest. And it's a $10 contest entry. So it's a pretty good, easy one to enter and should be pretty fun. So let's take a look at this player pool. Amon-Ra St Brown is having a great year. He's one of I think he's got like the best floor out of wide receivers this season, but he's also has a really good ceiling. We're looking at 33.5 points. That's a high point from 33.4 points. And then he has several 26.2 points, 21.7 points, 22.6 points. So he's just very consistent, gets over that 20-point mark very frequently, and that is super valuable in these showdown slates. So I like Amon-Ra St Brown this week. And on top of that, he's got a pretty decent matchup. The last time that they faced off, he scored 16.6 DraftKings points, but I think he was in the situation where they just didn't need to pass the ball in the second half of that game. And as far as the direct matchup, we're looking at the slot receivers for Detroit. They don't have the best matchup with Green Bay only allowing 14.5 DraftKings points a game to the slot position, and they are only allowing 9.2 points a game to the wideout position. So interesting situation there. And as far as the best DVOA matchups, it looks like the player aligning on the right side of the field is going to have the best DVOA matchup for Detroit. Amon-Ra has the worst DVOA matchup against Green Bay. Against Green Bay. So that is not great for Amon-Ra St. Brown, but as I said, he's got a great floor. But with a price of $17K in the captain position and 11.4 in the flex position, Amon-Ra is not someone you're going to need to jam in your lineups, but he's definitely got the highest, like raw point ceiling. Probably not as high as Jahmyr Gibbs in this particular matchup. Gibbs is splitting work with Montgomery, though. And the last few games since Montgomery has been back has actually been Gibbs and Montgomery doing well. And we're seeing 21.5 points last week. Montgomery returned against the Chargers, and Gibbs had 26.2 points in that game. Prior to that, we're looking at 32.9 points and 27.6 points. The genie's out of the bottle with Gibbs, and he is crushing. And that is a good thing. We were looking for him to break out earlier in the season, and he just took a little while. He just took till after the bye, or right before the bye week, when Montgomery went out, and it gave him his opportunity. And now he's more integrated into that offense, which is good for Gibbs. Jared Goff is up and down so far this season. You can see from these DraftKings points that he's been scoring. Only 17 points versus Chicago. I think that was a pretty rough game for him last week. 24 points versus the Chargers. 13.68 points versus Vegas, and 10.36 points versus Baltimore. So he's been in a bit of a slump there. Beyond that, he's had a couple decent weeks where he scored over 25 points. So he's kind of hit or miss with Jared Goff. He gets a matchup that Green Bay is allowing just 12.9 DraftKings points a game to the quarterback position. So Goff is not a lock this week either. So it's a little bit rough for the Goff situation. With Jahmyr Gibbs, just went over him. With David Montgomery, we're looking at a game log with Gibbs, both going off last week. 17.8 points for Montgomery last week, 20.6 against the Chargers, and that was coming off that injury and the bye week. So Montgomery and Gibbs have proven that they can go together in a lineup, and Green Bay has been pretty bad versus the run this season. And the last time that these guys played against the Packers, Gibbs had 9.1 points and Montgomery had 37.1 points. So that's pretty interesting as far as a matchup goes with these guys. I played around with the idea on the main slate of putting both these guys in the running back positions, and having McCaffrey in there too. So obviously one of these guys would be in the McCaffrey would be in the flex position. But I don't hate playing these two running backs together. They've shown the last couple weeks that they can both crush at the same time. Let's see what they did. Did they score a touchdown last week? Yeah, we saw a touchdown from Montgomery last week, and Gibbs had a touchdown as well. If they didn't both score touchdowns, though, let's say Gibbs missed out on a touchdown, then he still puts up 15 points, and that's on a slate like this, that might be enough to get him in the optimal. So I don't hate putting the two running backs together. With Jordan Love, talked about him a little bit at the top. He's been on and off this season, but mostly off. His rushing upside is what saves him. Last week, he had his best passing game. He threw 322 yards, and that was against the Chargers, who have a pretty bad defense. Against Detroit, though, Detroit is not allowing a lot of points to the quarterback position, but they are allowing a little bit more than Green Bay is. Detroit is allowing 17.7 DraftKings points a game to the quarterback position. So, that puts Love a little bit higher than Goff on my list for this game. But Jordan Love still makes a lot of mistakes, and it could go either way with him, but he's going to need to throw in this game with the running back situation that Green Bay is currently dealing with. They're missing Aaron Jones in this game, and A.J. Dillon is banged up. So they're going to have to rely on Jordan Love in this game. Jalen Reed has been his best receiver so far these past few weeks. He scored 19 points in back-to-back weeks. Jaden Reed, though, is pricey. He's at 8,200 on this slate. And we've seen the other showdown slates. They've been pretty soft on pricing. This game seems to be the opposite when you got Jaden Reed at 8,200. So it's very tough to get him in a lineup. LaPorta is in an interesting situation. LaPorta is, I believe, one of the top receivers. I think Rich Rebar mentioned that he's the number 2 receiver in this offense versus the coverage that Green Bay uses, cover 3. So that puts LaPorta on the map this week as a potential captain option, if not a flex option. And he's coming off of 2 slow weeks too, so that will help us out with the ownership being suppressed. If we look down a little bit further here, A.J. Dillon has just not been good this year. And then on top of that, he's got a really tough matchup against Detroit. Last game that they played against Detroit, he scored 1.1 DraftKings points. Let's see what Aaron Jones did in that game. Give you a little bit perspective of how the running backs did in the last game against them. Aaron Jones had 2.4 DraftKings points. So combined, they had 3.5 DraftKings points for the running game of Green Bay versus Detroit. So might be a fade there with the running backs this week. Look for Patrick Taylor, or let's see who else they have for running backs. Okay, so Wilson is on IR now. So Emmanuel Wilson is on IR. So it's going to be A.J. Dillon if he starts. He's questionable, but it looks like he's going to start. And then you got Patrick Taylor as the backup. Bob Gomes was talking about Patrick Taylor when I did the show with him the other day. Check it out. It's a full game or full slate show where we break down the entire slate and build a few DraftKings lineups for the entire slate, 3-game slate. But Patrick Taylor picked up off the Patriots practice squad, and he played a little bit with Green Bay earlier in the season. And, Patrick Taylor has an opportunity to do something this week. And he had 5 targets against the Raiders, and he had 4 targets against New Orleans. So it looks like he's going to be the passing down back in this game, where we project Green Bay to potentially be playing from behind. So that is good for Patrick Taylor, and it could make him pretty sneaky. What's his price at? Patrick Taylor is at 1,600 on this slate. So keep him in mind. Keep him in your player pool. We got Romeo Doubs. He's getting the most red zone targets on the team, and he has been pretty consistent with getting at least double-digit points. He's not too expensive at 6,200. I would probably play Doubs over Taylor. Doubs over what's his face? Jaden Reed, just because Jaden Reed is so expensive, and he's been good the last couple weeks, and he's been relatively consistent too. He's about a step higher than Doubs has been this year, but Doubs has been playing respectably. And if we look at these matchups for these Green Bay receivers, Jaden Reed has the best matchup in the slot, where Detroit is giving up 21 DraftKings points a game to slot receivers. Wideouts are getting 11.2 points per game from Detroit's defense, and that's about a middling level. We're looking at tight end. Is Detroit's only allowing 11 DraftKings points a game. That's middling level too. Green Bay is about the same. They're allowing 11 points a game. But in a situation where Luke Musgrave is out look for more of these targets to go around to guys like Reed and Dubs and even Christian Watson down here. Christian Watson has been struggling this year. He had 10 points, DraftKings points, scored his first touchdown last week. But beyond that, he has really just not done much of anything this entire year. He missed the first few weeks of the season with an injury. Looks like he scored a touchdown versus Detroit the last time that they played. So last week wasn't the first touchdown; it was the second touchdown, and it was a receiving touchdown. So yeah, he's had 2 touchdowns on the year. Scored 1 against Detroit. Last game versus Detroit, he had 10.5 DraftKings points. So Christian Watson is super cheap. He's at 5,600. Which makes him in play for sure, just knowing what his upside is. So keep that in mind with Christian Watson in this matchup. It's going to be a good potential sleeper for Christian Watson, or not necessarily like sleeper, but his ownership might be depressed just because he hasn't really done anything this year. His name value might keep him in play though with the rest of the field, but kind of keep an eye on that ownership, because if Christian Watson goes under-owned, he has potential to do pretty well in this matchup, but also potential. He's got captain upside. I don't know that I want to put him in captain in this particular game, just based on, we haven't really seen anything out of him yet this season, but we know what he's capable of. So I don't hate the idea of putting him in captain this week. Jameson Williams, he's been playing more as the weeks go on. He's not getting a ton of targets, but he scored a second touchdown last week. 12.5 DraftKings points in that game. Jameson Williams has a bunch of upside, but he hasn't really shown it yet. So let's just put it that way. We haven't really seen the upside potential of him yet. Could happen in this game, and that's going to put Jameson Williams in play this week, depending on your game script that you're going with. Luke Musgrave on IR. We're looking at the kickers. Kickers are going to be in play in this game. We're looking at a couple kickers playing in a dome, so that's going to be good. And one of them looks like Patterson. What's Patterson's situation? I think Patterson's going to start. Keep an eye on the injury report, though, because they have two Detroit kickers on this slate. So hopefully it's not a situation where, just keep an eye on that. Make sure you're not putting in a kicker that's not going to be playing, because you don't want to run an optimizer or whatever you're doing with a dead kicker in there. So Carlson on the Green Bay side, he's been doing next to nothing this year, but kickers, you never know when they're going to pop off. It's all really depends on the game flow. I tend to probably lean against putting him in at 4,600. I kind of like Patterson better, assuming Patterson's going to be the guy. Patterson's had a proven this season that the Detroit is going to be in position to kick field goals versus Carlson, who is he doesn't have as many opportunities as Patterson's going to get. Obviously, the Lions D, I kind of like the Lions D in this matchup just because they produce a lot of pressure on the quarterback, and Jordan Love is really bad against pressure. We talked about that a couple weeks ago with Jordan Love and how bad he does against pressure. And, it's going to be a good spot for the Lions defense, especially if they're able to take a lead and force Jordan Love to throw the balls. I don't hate putting the Lions defense in with Jordan Love either, because that's a relationship that works both ways. And even with Love, if you decide to put him in the captain, this is a spot where you can have Captain Love along with the Detroit defense in it. With Josh Reynolds, he's been getting less work as Jameson Williams has been playing, and he has not done anything in a few weeks. So Josh Reynolds, might be a guy that we ignore this week. Last game versus Green Bay, he had 9.9 DraftKings points, but he really hasn't done too much this season. So I'm gonna avoid Josh Reynolds in this week. Packers D, probably gonna stay away from the Packers D too, because the Packers defense is. What's up, bud? Good to see you. Packers defense is, and they haven't really done too much beyond that, like for the season. So Packers D. Let's look at the points that they've given up. They gave up 20 points to the Chargers, 23 points to Pittsburgh. They did pretty well against the Rams. Only gave up 3 points there. 24 points versus Minnesota, 19, 17, 34. So they're doing respectably, even though they kind of put themselves in a bad spot by getting rid of their corners. But it's a situation where it kind of depends. Like with Jared Goff, the way that he's been playing lately, maybe they are worth keeping in your player pool. But it kind of depends on what you want to go for your game script in that situation. Khalif Raymond. He's another guy that's been basically suffering with Jameson Williams coming alive, but Khalif Raymond hasn't really done anything beyond that. Anyways, they just got too many passing options in this offense now. They don't need to rely on guys like Raymond and Reynolds. They got Jahmyr Gibbs. They got Jameson Williams. They got Amon-Ra St Brown, and they got LaPorta. So where is the rest of these passes and these targets going to go to? So I would probably stay away from guys like Raymond and Reynolds this week. I don't think you need to go there, and they're expensive for considering their current roles. This guy Wicks, he's a receiver on Green Bay. He's been getting a decent amount of targets lately, 5 targets, and then 3 weeks in a row with 4 targets. Put up 12 DraftKings points, and then a few with 8 DraftKings points. He's questionable this week, but I kind of like this guy at 2,200 with all the work that he gets. So he's a guy I'm going to keep in my player pool depending on his injury situation. He had a concussion, so that kind of sucks because it's tough to come back from concussions. When you're playing on Thursday. He was limited to 1 capped walkthrough on Wednesday. It seems less than questionable to be able to suit up Thursday. So yeah, that's too bad if he can't play. If he can't play, that would boost up Christian Watson, I think. Christian Watson and Romeo Doubs, but particularly Christian Watson, who has a greater need for targets. So Craig Reynolds, I'm not interested there. Patrick Taylor, I talked about him a bit. Bob Gomes was talking about him on the show that I did with him, and I like Patrick Taylor, leaving him in the player pool. He's got potential with the perceived game script. Kraft is the backup to Musgrave. You got 2 targets last week, 3 targets. He hasn't done anything too much, but let's see how Detroit is doing against tight ends. Yeah, they're middling against tight ends. So, I don't think he's going to get the volume that you're going to need in this slate with all these studs to make it into the optimal. We're looking for, like if he catches a touchdown, let's say he catches 2 receptions for, like 10 yards and a touchdown, like that's still not going to be enough to get him in the optimal, I don't think. Especially when you've got cheap guys like the kickers or Jameson Williams. He's pretty cheap. Christian Watson is cheap. You're not going to have trouble getting guys into your lineup, I don't think, in this slate. So I like Patrick Taylor a lot more than Kraft. And Donovan Peoples-Jones, he's on Detroit now too, but he's kind of redundant with Williams. Let's see what he did recently since he's been in Detroit. Yeah, he isn't. He got 1 target in week 11. That's about it. So Not really interested there. Toure, he has these random games. At least he did with Rodgers, where he would pop up and have a good week, but not really interested there. And other than that, I don't really see anyone to dumpster dive with. So let's go ahead and get into this lineup. We'll build a more chalky one first. Let me see what the optimizer is spitting out. Get a look at what the chalkier build might be in this slate this week. So let me just build this optimal. Let's see what we got. All right, we're looking at Amon-Ra St Brown in the captain. Optimizer also likes Kraft, who I just reviewed negatively. I don't like Kraft. We'll put him in there anyways because the optimizer wants him in there. They got Watson. If we go to Watson and we go to Dylan, who they also like, I don't like any of these guys, so I don't think I'm going to be relying on the base projections this week. It's going to be a lot of manipulating projections this week. They got Jordan Love in there too. I don't mind Love. He's the only him and Amon-Ra are the only guys I like, but I don't even like Amon-Ra that much in the captain. And they got Goff in there too. So that's a look at the optimal. If I was trying to do this build and I wanted Amon-Ra in there, get rid of Kraft, maybe leave Watson in there, get rid of Dylan. If I had Amon-Ra in there, I would maybe put in, I don't think we need Goff. Let's put in Gibbs because he's going to get receiving work and the passing work. That leaves us with 8K for 2 spots. I think I would lean more. Let's see. I like LaPorta. That's too many receivers in there, though. So let's get Gibbs out of there and put in Goff. That leave with 1,700, and that leaves you with Patrick Taylor. So I'd like that build better if we were going with Amon-Ra, because in this build we got Amon-Ra is getting thrown to by Goff, and Goff is also thrown to LaPorta. That gives Goff 2 receivers to get him into the optimal. Jordan Love has Christian Watson, and Jordan Love also has that rushing upside, but then he's also going to be playing from behind, and he's passing to Patrick Taylor. So the correlation makes sense with this lineup. I think I'd like that better than the optimal build, but gives you an idea of a direction that you can go if you wanted to put any faith in Christian Watson. If you don't like Christian Watson, maybe we take out Goff. Maybe we put back in, let's see. Let's put in Montgomery. Let's say that Montgomery is the running back. Amon-Ra's setting him up for touchdowns. Montgomery's getting a couple touchdowns, but Amon-Ra's making enough PPR points to stay relevant. LaPorta is also getting PPR points, and Jordan Love is going to be throwing to, I like Jaden Reed's matchup the best, but he's too expensive. So if we go down to dubs, that leaves us with that Patrick Taylor option too. That would also be a 3-3 build. So you got a few different ways that you can go with a chalkier build like that. Let's clear that out. Let's see. I want to try to do a build where we got Gibbs in the captain maybe, and then Montgomery in there too. I'm going to go that direction. On the other side, maybe LaPorta is the guy who's helping to get them set up for scoring. Or you could use Williams in that situation too. But let's put LaPorta in there for now. Let's go with, I think Love probably has the most upside on the Green Bay guys, although he's got that tough matchup. Let's put Detroit's defense in here. Been using the defense a lot. The defense is actually pretty cheap relative to what I've seen recently. So I like putting the Detroit defense in this build. Leaves us with 7,200 per guy left. Let's get Reed in there because he's got the better matchup. You could also put Love in there. Let's put Love in there. That's going to leave us with 5,500. That gives us options like Jameson Williams, any of the kickers. I would probably lean on probably the Packers kicker. But I don't like the Packers kicker. So let's try to find a different route to go there. It sucks that Musgrave is out because Musgrave would be perfect in that build. Patrick Taylor is basically the only other Green Bay guy that you can get in there besides the kicker, who I don't necessarily like this week. But the kicker could be an option. Let's get rid of Love. Let's put in Jaden Reed instead. That leaves us with 6,300. That way we can get Dubs in there too. Jaden Reed getting the PPR points maybe, and then Dubs coming in with a couple touchdowns or a touchdown. That way Jordan Love could still be justified getting left off the slate. And we also have other options like Christian Watson if you wanted to plug him in, Jameson Williams if you wanted to plug him in. Using Reed over Love just leaves you with a lot more options. If we got rid of him, let's get rid of LaPorta and plug in. Let's plug in Williams instead of LaPorta. And that leaves us with 6,900. 6,900 gives us an ability to put back in LaPorta if you wanted to. You could put LaPorta back in that situation. I think that's a little too many receivers to have with no Goff, if we're counting Gibbs as more of a receiving back. But you could do that. You could put in Dubs, give Jordan Love another guy to throw to. Actually, no, give him one guy to throw to. So, I like Dubs, I think, in this build. That way, Jordan Love is throwing to Dubs. Dubs is the only one finding success. You could do the same thing with Watson. You can swap out Watson in there too. A couple ways you can go there, but I kind of like the idea of playing around with getting both those Detroit running backs in there. Make sure to see if that's going to be a chalky direction or not. I'm just kind of spitballing with this direction. Let's see what the optimizer has, the projections for ownerships. David Montgomery is projected at about 29%, and Gibbs is at 41%. So I don't think there's going to be a whole lot of lineups that work them both in together, but just keep that in mind. You could swap out Montgomery into the captain too. Let's put Montgomery in the captain and put Gibbs in as a receiver. And that way we have 7,300 left over. You could still do the LaPorta thing if you wanted to. Dubs, you got a bunch of options. So you'll play around with it a little bit. Hopefully that helps you guys think this through a little bit. Make sure to hit that like button. Get me to 15 likes, and I'll try to put out a video before the game tomorrow. And make sure to hit that subscribe button. Check out the other videos I have up. I got the whole slate with Bobby Gomes. I got the Dallas game with Head Chopper. I got the San Francisco game with Spread Astaire. So a lot of good content up there, and I'll be putting up some more as the night goes on to try to get it up before those games tomorrow. So good luck, everybody, and I'll see you next time.